All right, guys. So once service is actually over, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna save the files. So we'll go into Ableton Recorder, and we've already stopped the processes. Okay, so we'll select this so that it's no longer red, and we're also gonna select this up top. So we're gonna go File, Save Live Set As. Then we're going to save it, sort of like what you see here. And today's date is going to be 10-30 16 AM for AM service and MSG. Okay, so once we do that, we're going to go ahead and click save. It's going to take a moment to actually render the file. Now, by default, it saves as a WAV file here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that WAV file and convert it. Okay, so it's finished saving. So what we're going to do is I'm going to exit out. We'll come over to the Ableton recording folder. Now if we take a look in there, we've got today's file, it's 10:30, and you've got two different files here. Now by default, I would just go ahead and select the larger of the two, because that's the one that is most likely the one that is the recording of the sermon. Okay, so I'm going to double click on that. That file is going to go ahead and import into iTunes. Once it's in there, we're going to rename this file. All right, so I'll highlight this, go ahead and drop in 10-30-16-AM-MSG. Hit enter. We're good there. Okay. Now we're going to go up top here to where it says file. We're going to convert this file into an MP3 file. The reason why we do that is because MP3 is a smaller format. Once we have that converted over into an MP3, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy that file over to the Dropbox. So we're going to, while that's loading up, we're going to go into the start, and we're going to open Sync Toy. Sync Toy is a pretty cool tool. It'll automatically copy these files over that we need. So once this raw file is finished, it'll go ahead and copy the file over into our Dropbox folder, into the uncut sermons folder inside of Dropbox. And once we produce the file for the MP3, we'll go back in here, do the exact same thing. We'll run Sync Toy, and it'll download that file for us and put it onto the church's network, so that we can have that file for production of CDs later on. All right, so let's see where we're at. All right, great. So file is finished now. You can tell because it's not grayed out anymore. So we're just going to go ahead, select Run All, and this is actually pretty quick. Runs through it, file is copied, and now Dropbox is actually working on it. Good. So we can close Sync Toy out for right now. Now once this is finished, we're just going to double check, make sure that the file is actually in Dropbox, and then we'll be able to start the second part of this process, which is actually going in and producing the raw uncut sermon file into the finished product, which is what we end up putting out online. right, so we got about 8 seconds left. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this because we'll be able to see what happens on this end as that file is uploaded. Now we see Dropbox is pulling that file down. Great. Once it's been updated, we'll go ahead and start the process. Excellent. So, first things first is let's go in and actually pick up the actual file that we need here. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this. Let's move that to the trash. And we're going to open the actual file here. Awesome. So now, by opening this up from that uncut sermons folder and opening this up in iTunes, what's going to happen here is now we have a new file that's been recently added that we can go into inside of this media folder here. So I'm going to click off of this and then go back into it, and it should import that file. Excellent. So we just got it here. All right, so what I'm going to do is take this file off. I'm going to import this new one. Now, once you click and hold here, we'll be able to drag that into the timeline and let it import it. So by default, I'm going to start with the intro and the outro here muted. And I do that so that I can just isolate the sound from the actual file that we're importing now. So once this is finished here, we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how to trim both ends of the file and just take what we actually need for for the podcast itself. Okay, so we're good to go here. So I'm just going to jump into the timeline at a random spot here, around 3 minutes, and we'll see what's going on at this section of the file. Okay, so what we're actually looking for is the portion at which Pastor transitions from giving any sort of announcements or taking any sort of praise reports, and he's actually transitioning into the teaching and preaching portion because that's what most people are going to be interested in. Okay, so we're going to keep going here. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm actually going through, and as I click on this ruled area here, it's moving. Uh, it's moving the section forward, which we're going to listen to, and then I'm pressing the space bar on my keyboard to start playing the file instead of actually coming up here to press the play button. Okay, so we're going to keep going here. Jump ahead a couple minutes. Okay, so book of the month. Okay. Okay, so now he's actually transitioned at this point, so we're going to go back just a minute or two. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, so this is that portion. Okay, so that's the point that we actually need to trim. So we're going to roll this back a couple of seconds. Okay, so we're going to start there. Went back a little too far. Okay, so we're going to start about right here. Um, Usually, pastor go ahead and give some sort of instruction. Tells people to lock in. Tells people this is what you can look forward to today. And this is one of those messages where it's important to hear a little bit of that intro before he transitions into the actual teaching. So that's why we're going to include that here. And in order for us to trim this, we're going to do one of two things. You can either come up top to where it says edit, you can click and then go ahead and select split regions at the playhead, which is this thing here. Okay. Or you actually see a shortcut key here, which is the Command and T buttons. I usually just use the shortcuts that I know, so I'm just going to drop that in there. Now, I hit Command T, and what you see is that you have two different regions now. One that's on the right side of the playhead, one that's on the left side of the playhead. By default, what is highlighted here is the portion that is this light tan color, and back here in the orange, that's what's been deselected. Okay, so this is the portion that we're actually going to discard. So we'll highlight it and hit the delete key. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to scale this back and we're going to drag the timeline back to where the introduction starts. Now what's kind of cool about this is I'm going to bring these portions back in and we're going to hear the transition between the introduction and the actual preaching portion. So I'm going to start it roughly around 31 seconds or so. So about right here. Okay. So we'll unmute these two sections here. Now if I click on this section here, I'm going to bring that back to 31 seconds. Okay. So let's hear how this transitions.
Loving people. Now, here's Pastor Scott.
All right, good. That should work for us. All right, so now we're going to do the same exact thing on the opposite end, and we're going to make sure that what we cut from the very end will work. Okay, so what I did was I clicked on the podcast outro portion and I went ahead and I just clicked on it, dragged it over, kept it on the same timeline. Now you can move it between different timelines, but it's easier just to keep it right on the same one. So I'm pulling this out so that I can figure out where that transition should be from uh, where he gives the final prayer into us transitioning back into the music and the end of the podcast. So let's see what we got. Okay. So I'm going to widen this out some. Now, usually where you see some huge spikes is where we have a lot of music or just a lot of commotion that's going on as we transition between maybe paying the tithe or maybe saying the welcome, that sort of thing. So I'm going to come back to this portion or come to this portion here and let's figure out where we are. He should be close to finishing up the prayer here.
Get your connection in your spirit right. Get your connection in your checkbook right.
That sounds like the tithe. So we're going to come back a little bit further.
Thank you for your spirit that guides us.
And there's the
Pray you
prayer.
save the lost and encourage your children. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, so that's exactly the spot that we are going to cut it. So I'm going to go ahead and select our raw and uncut file again. And again, Command T. Now this time the exact portion that we need to have cut is cut correctly. So we'll just go ahead and delete it. And then I'm going to drag the timeline over, or I'm going to drag the outro over on the timeline to the point where he transitions out of the prayer by saying, in Jesus' name. So let me open up the timeline a little bit more, and we're going to drag the playhead back by clicking on the ruled area here and play it.
And encourage your children. In Jesus'
Okay, so we'll stop it there, and I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm actually going to fade this in. If you notice with the intro, it faded out as we were transitioning into passive speaking. So you just take a look here real quick. Yeah, so both of our intro pieces trail off here, and the actual sermon starts to fade up. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this here back to the end, and now I'm going to open this up just a little bit so that we can see this transition. So usually there is no fading out of the sermon. What we usually do is we'll fade in the outro music. So what I'd like to do is just play through it once and then we'll hear how that transition takes place. Usually there's about 6 seconds between this point to this point in the music where you'll hear the music kind of cue up and the vocals come in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw this down just a little bit to about 14, negative 14 decibels. We're going to click on that little line here. We're going to add a cue in, and if we click on and hold that dot, we can draw the sound level up, and this will in effect fade in the music. So we're going to see how it sounds at about negative 5.8 here, and I'm going to make that transition.
and encourage your children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, so it actually came in a little bit louder than we wanted to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw our playhead back sort of about an hour and 24 minutes. Okay, so if we draw this back to about 9 seconds, and hit enter, this will show us where we need to actually bring in the music. Okay, so let's bring this back in And let's see how it transitions now.
Thank you for your spirit that guides us. Lord, I pray you'd save the lost.
Okay, so that music is still a little bit loud. We're going to add an extra dot here and we're going to draw this down even more. And we're going to make this transition a little bit slower. Okay, so our start point is negative 26. Our end point here will be around negative 19. So let's see how this sounds.
Thank you for your spirit that guides us. Lord, I pray you'd save the lost and encourage your children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Excellent. So I'm just going to bring this volume down a little bit more so it's not too high. So we're at 19. This one will end up being 14. Excellent. So we'll bring it back one more time and then we'll see how it sounds.
Lord, thank you for your spirit that guides us. Lord, I pray you'd save the lost and encourage your children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for listening to the ALCF Sound Doctrine Podcast. And visit us on the web at AL.
Excellent. So now that we have both sections put in, intro and outro, we're going to go ahead and save the file. Now, in order to do this, what we're going to go do is we're going to go back to the Dropbox folder and we're going to look at the title of today's actual notes file. So once we have that pulled up, it's pretty simple here. We'll just select it, clicking once, and if we hit Command C, it'll copy it, or you can right click and copy. Then we can come back over and we'll go to File, Save As. Now once this menu box opens up, then we're going to go ahead, since it's already highlighted, we'll do Command V, or you can right click and then select paste, but it'll drop the file name in there exactly as it is from the notes file. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to figure out where we want to save this file. Now since it's on the GarageBand, um, uh, it's by default it goes into where GarageBand wants you to save it. We're actually going to save that in a different area. All right, so we're going to go to Western Digital here, GarageBand. This is actually on an external hard drive, so we're not eating up a lot of file space on the local hard drive. But we've got a file name in here. We'll go ahead and click Save. This will take a minute or two to save. Once we do that, then we're actually going to do the export of the MP3 file. This is just saving as the GarageBand file for right now. And once we finish with that, we'll go ahead and get it loaded up online so that we can republish it not only for SoundCloud, but also for us to make CDs, from the U drive at the church. All right, so we'll give that just a minute. Okay, excellent. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to share that file now by clicking Share, Export Song to Disk. And this one, we're going to go right into Dropbox. public 2016 or 2017 or whatever the appropriate folder is. Since this year is 2016, we're going to run right in with this. So 2016 messages, this is the file folder where we're saving it, but we also have to come back and we're going to truncate. We're going to cut some of this file name because by default it tries to save the date and the time in the file name, and we're going to take that portion off. Go all the way back to just the title. It's selected as an MP3. We're going to use medium quality file, which is 128 bits per second, or excuse me, 128 kilobits per second. This gives us a high enough sound quality to where it's not sounding really garbled, or you don't hear any granular sound in the background. So once we have that selected, these are all our defaults anyway, but we'll go ahead and click export and it will start running through it. Now this process usually takes about 10 minutes or so I'm going to stop the recording here and we'll pick it back up once it's finished.